It outlasts, it outperforms, it outlives everything. In a word, it's love. God is love. He said as much about himself. Is it any surprise that the enemies of God will do everything possible to steal and kill and destroy any kind of understanding or experience that God's people would have with this commodity, this power, this force, love? And if you combine the host of evil and their intentions with our own propensity as failing human beings, you put that together and you know what you've got when it comes to love? One huge mass ball of confusion. In fact, here you go. The kids were asked, kids, what's your definition of love? And they say, well, love is when my sister leaves me alone. Or it's when my parents say yes. They let me do what I want to do. There you go. And when you ask the cynic, he takes his shot at defining love and he says, love is a lesson in human frailty. Okay. And then he said, love is a candle lit at both ends, and when it meets, it extinguishes itself. I don't like that definition of love at all. Okay, let's go on. They get better. Oh yeah. Here, this one is the frustrated romantic philosopher's definition of love. Love is the dim glow of the candle flame of hope buried at the bottom of a well so deep that on a no-moon night, peering over the edge as far as possible, you cannot detect the feeble flame. You know it's there, but the rope you have is only 5 feet long. That deserves no comment. How about this definition? From the daydreaming schizophrenic. Love is sitting at the window, looking out and remembering who you were the night before. Wow. And then you've got Hollywood's definition. Love is where fantasy meets reality. Boom, and there's a wonderful explosion and it just all happens, right? I think we would be safe to say that our world is clueless when it comes to this great force, this great thing called love. The Old Testament story we're in the middle of, this series, it is giving us real pictures of real love. Ruth's journey, roller coasters from despair to hope, from gripping fear to warm acceptance, misery and sorrow, and then out of nowhere, up pops this deepest of love. And how love can come out of such a negative situation can only be attributed to God. He's the only one who could do that. I keep telling you this nobody writes a story like God. Last Sunday in our story, Ruth found favor with the landowner Boaz, you remember? She was welcomed by him to go ahead and gather any grain in the fields, following her workers, all the way through the harvest. So day after day, likely week after week, now Ruth has been doing just that. So we pick up the story in Ruth chapter 3 and verse 1. One day Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, "My daughter, I must find a home for you where you will be provided for." Now, marriages back in that day and back in that culture were normally arranged by the parents. You realize Ruth has completely left her family in Moab. She is now in this new foreign land. So Naomi is just kind of assuming the responsibility as the parent. She's the mother-in-law, but Ruth doesn't have anybody else. So, and it's at this point that the story really starts getting interesting. All right, let's pick up verse 2, Ruth 3. Now Boaz, this is still Naomi talking to her daughter-in-law Ruth. Now Boaz, with whose women you've worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight, he'll be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, get dressed in your best clothes, and then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know that you're there until he's finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he's lying, then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He'll tell you what to do. I will do whatever you say, Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. Now, if we read this from our North American culture, from our American mindset, we might jump to the conclusion that Naomi is encouraging her daughter-in-law, Ruth, to prostitute herself in order to get ahead. One preacher I read actually said that this could be perceived by some that Naomi is pimping out Ruth. And that's a terrible thing to say, but when you look at it through our point of view, that kind of appears that way. So suddenly this beautiful love story that we've been looking at these many weeks is now degenerating into some seedy, scandalous dime store novel. The truth is, nothing of what the American culture might interpret on this could be farther from the truth. Naomi told Ruth to go down to the threshing floor. Back then, this wouldn't be a place of structure. This would be a hard-packed section of ground. It was an open-air area where the stalks of grain would be slammed against the ground and then thrown up to the air, and the wind would carry the lighter straw away, leaving the heavier kernels, the grain, to fall to the ground. It was an open area where the wind would really assist in this separating process. So at the end of the day, when the workers would share this meal together around the threshing floor, the piles of grain would be all over the place, and then after the meal they would all retire and they would sleep around the piles of grain to discourage any would-be thieves from coming and making off with all their work. The reason Naomi told Ruth to wait until Boaz had plenty to eat and drink is the same reason today. All of us feel physically better after a great meal. It puts us in a better mood. Don't you know that? I mean, some of us, that's our drug of choice. We just feel better after we eat. And if you're in a better mood and you're feeling physically better, that's a lot better time for someone to make a request. Requests have a better chance. I mean, this is all through the scripture. You guys remember this story? Some of you may have never read the story about Nehemiah. He was a cupbearer to the king. He had a huge request to put on this king that was going to involve major expense and major time away. Nehemiah made sure and waited to make his request. That's in Nehemiah chapter 2 and verse 1. To wait until the king had already eaten and had plenty to drink. And the same thing happened with Queen Esther when she was going to make an incredible claim and then also ask for something on the heels of that. She waited after 2 nights of banquets before she decided to go ahead and make her request. And that's over in Esther chapter 7 and verse 2. The point is, Naomi wants Ruth to use the same common sense. And that common sense continues. Naomi tells Ruth to doll up. Not much has changed in 3,100 years, guys. I mean, if you want to know how to make a good impression, this is either guy to girl or girl to guy. I mean, clean up, smell up, dress up, and wait up. That could be the outline of chapter 3. In fact, one preacher said, look nice, smell nice, act vulnerable, and catch them sleeping. That could be an outline of chapter 3 too. Seriously, Naomi told Ruth to notice where he would lie down to go to sleep, and then quietly go over there and uncover the covers from his feet and lie down at his feet. And lying down at his feet would automatically indicate a very humble, servant-like act. So we pick up the text in verse 7. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned and there was a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. I'm your servant, Ruth. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family. I think a lot needs to be said about this. Let's start with the first part where she says, I am your servant. It's Ruth, the servant. You remember the first time she met Boaz back in the field a few weeks before then, at the beginning of the harvest. Why, the exchange that they had there, Ruth admits that she was a foreigner. She was an alien. She wasn't a part of this land, this God-blessed land. She came from Moab. And a foreigner back then would carry very negative implications. Number one, it's admitting that you're a pagan, that you're a heathen. And according to Jewish law, a foreigner could never marry into Jewish circles. So this time, when Ruth is asked, when Boaz says, "Who is this?" she doesn't say that she's a foreigner. She says that she's a servant. In other words, she's in this group, like one of Boaz's hired ladies. She doesn't see herself as a foreigner anymore. And I think that's significant because you remember the promise that she made to Naomi? That great, great vow that's been, repeated now for over 3,000 years. She said, "Naomi, I want you to know that I'm making your people my people. Your God will be my God." Well, this promise that Ruth had made was now really starting to take root and blossom in her own life. Really to believe what she had said. I'm one of y'all. And then notice what Ruth said. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer." Now, the word for garment is the exact same Hebrew word used back in chapter 2 when Boaz gave that blessing over Ruth. Look at this verse. This is verse 12. This is Boaz talking to Ruth on their first meeting. "May the Lord repay you for what you have done." He was talking about leaving her land and going with Naomi. "May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Wings and garment, same Hebrew word. So you see what is happening here is Ruth is using the same words that Boaz spoke over her in that blessing those days, probably weeks before. He's using that same language to say, "I want to come under your protection in marriage." She's expressing her desire to be his wife. And I don't think that we in our dumbed down English language can appreciate this moment. This is romantic stuff. This isn't, "Hey, think we might shag up together?" And I mean, this isn't anything close to that. This is like the stuff that you read from some old, beautiful English. No, this is the great Hebrew stuff. It makes all of our efforts at romance and language just kind of pale. This is really, really beautiful. And you hit this idea of the kinsman redeemer. Everything's been kind of pointing to this moment when Boaz kind of fulfills this destiny that's been placed on him. This kinsman redeemer. It's somebody who could step in and help out a relative in a time of trouble. Whether it would be buying back family land that was lost, or helping a family get out of debt, or if a family member ended up falling into some sort of problems and they had to sell themselves as slaves, then this kinsman redeemer could come in and buy back that person's freedom. They could even help fulfill what in the law was referred to as the levirate marriage law. And what that meant, that if a family member was widowed, then another family member of the deceased could marry the survivor, and so the name of the deceased would then carry on. Ruth wanted Naomi's family name to be carried on. But what's Boaz going to do? I mean, what Ruth has done is very humble. And it's very servant-like. But it was forward. It was very, very forward. And then we get Boaz's response in verse 10. "The Lord bless you, my daughter." Don't you know those words spoke relief into Ruth? She's going, "What in the world am I doing here?" "May the Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier in staying with Naomi. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Although it is true that I am a guardian redeemer of our family, There is another who is more closely related than I. Stay here tonight, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good. Let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, no one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor. He also said, bring me the shawl you are wearing and hold it out. When she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and placed the bundle on her. Then he went back to town. Okay, before we get into some of the beautiful stuff in this, I got to tell you, I so enjoyed reading some different Bible scholars this week, and they squirm at this passage, especially some of the older ones that come from our real Puritan background. There's one guy, you've heard of the Clark commentary series? Adam Clark, he wrote this in 1859. And I was in the office by myself laughing out loud. In fact, some guys came in after a little bit of service. I said, you've got to see this. And so I put it down on the screen for you. I think the guy must have had daughters. Look what he said about this text. Look at the screen. Had not Boaz been a person of extraordinary piety, this experiment might have been fatal to Ruth. The experiment, however, was dangerous and should in no sense be imitated. Can you almost imagine him saying, okay, my daughters, do not do this, women of the church. Do not follow Ruth's example here. He's really nervous about it. The commentaries go on. In the Interpreter's Bible, which was written back in the middle of the last century, look what they said. Most commentators refer with approval to the delicacy with which this incident is told, but there was little guarantee that such delicacy would be maintained if the passage should be repeated and elaborated on in a sermon. Embarrassed rather than appreciation is apt to be the outcome. I almost feel like he's talking to young preachers saying, beware, preaching this text. You're going to fall flat on your face and everybody's going to really... You guys, I could not feel more the opposite than these scholars on this. I think this text needs to be preached time and time again. This is the good stuff. It's like some of our Puritan background about the incredible physical union in marriage. It's like we almost call that subject taboo. It's supposed to stay in the bedroom, but talking about the beauty of it, the purity of it, come on, people. He created it. He's the God of love. He's the one, yes, it's done in His work and in His design and in His borders, and in that it is great and beautiful. This is the good stuff. This is the stuff we don't need to shy away from. I'm thankful to be preaching this. And it's just such a great story. You can almost sense something in Boaz and Ruth that they are going to go to whatever length possible to protect the other's reputation. Do you see this? I told you at the beginning that this story has real pictures of real love. If you want to jot down a couple of things in your outline, in your program, you can do that. I just want to give you 3 qualities of love that really come to the surface in this story. And the first one is, real love is selfless, which our culture knows very little about. It finds the best in the other person. It doesn't blame. It doesn't tattletale. It looks for the other's best interest. In fact, this is talked about in the New Testament, where it says, don't merely look out for your own personal interests, but also to the interest of others. That's love. Ruth could have stayed in Moab. She could have stayed where her family was, where her friends were. She could have left herself the most likely place to find another husband after she buried her first one. She had no legal bond to Naomi. When her husband died, when Ruth's husband died, Naomi's son, there was no connection there. There was nothing that she had to stay with her. That's not it. That's why this is so beautiful. Ruth just can't walk away from a hurting widow woman. And when lonely and abandoned Naomi told Ruth to propose to a man who in all likelihood Boaz was probably at least twice her age. He was probably closer to the age of Naomi's husband, Abimelech. Ruth's respect for her mother-in-law won out. She said, yeah. Ruth preferred to build up the house of her deceased husband than to go her own way, make her own name. And I thought Boaz's response to Ruth was equally selfless. He said, Ruth, that you would want some old goat like me. That's the King James Robert version there. Ruth, that you would want someone like me when you could have had anybody younger and stronger. Speaks to a kindness that I think is even greater than the kindness that you showed with Naomi. Boaz thought Ruth marrying him, offering herself in marriage to him, was an even more selfless sacrificial act than her leaving all of her hometown and all of her friends and family and sticking by Naomi's side. Real love is humble, selfless sacrifice. You want the definition? You're getting the definition of what real love looks like. This is the real picture. And how can you escape the purity of real love? Point number 2. Real love is pure. The text is clear. Ruth stayed at his feet all night. Boaz maintains only appropriate behavior. I mean, can you imagine if our American culture got a hold of this script? You think they might take a little license here? Oh my. Number one, the covers wouldn't have stopped at the feet. And she wouldn't have stayed at his feet. And that big pile of grain, that would have been flying all over the place, and there would have been a crazy love scene. That's what our culture would have done with this great, great, beautiful, romantic, pure Bible love story. It was nothing like that. And another aspect of purity is the determination to operate within the rules. I'm talking about within God's holy design. It's so crazy to me. There's this thought in our culture that if you can veer out of God's design, that you're going to experience ecstasy beyond your wildest dreams. It couldn't be. You know who the best lovers are? Christians. Because they do it in God's design, in His way. Boaz looks to fulfill his own desires? Oh, sure. But never outside of God's plan. And God's plan always has boundaries that are for our protection. God's plan always has a design that's for our deeper meaning. Before saying yes to Ruth, he points out that there is another man who is a closer relationship to Ruth's deceased husband than he is. And Boaz can't accept Ruth's offer without giving this man first dibs. That's real love. When a person stays and waits, that's what love looks like. Love waits. Lust doesn't. Real love plays by the rules. It's wonderfully pure. And the third thing is real love is constant. It does what it says, and it says what it does. It's dependable. It's reliable. It follows through. It can be counted on. Did you catch Boaz's promise in verse 12 and 13? Look at the screen. I am a close relative to you, but there is one even closer than I am. So stay the rest of the night. In the morning, if he wants to exercise his customary rights and responsibilities as the closest covenant redeemer, he'll have his chance. But if he isn't interested, as God lives, I'll do it. It's just great language. Now go back to sleep until morning. We will find out next week if Boaz keeps good on his promise, if there's any doubt. But notice how Boaz indicates his intentions when it comes to keeping his promises. So we read the rest of the chapter, verse 16. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, "How did it go, my daughter?" And she told her everything Boaz had done for her and added, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" Then Naomi said, "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens. For the man will not rest until the matter is settled today." Ruth told Naomi what Boaz actually said when he was pouring that grain into her shawl. He said, "Don't you dare go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed." Boaz had every intention of keeping his promise. Isn't this real love? I mean, you take that and you put it against some movie that we watch, and then you see this, and you see steps of morality and integrity taken at every place, with all of the romance and all of the buildup, with all of that opportunity for someone to be exploited and for lines to be crossed and things to go wrong. But no, to me, that's what makes it so great. It could have been terrible, but it was right. It was pure. It was a great date. I don't want any of y'all to imitate it, but it was a great moment. Doesn't real love show up in the worst circumstances? Could it get worse for Naomi and Ruth? They bury their husbands. Naomi buries her boys. Does it get better? Can love actually spring up from that kind of tragedy? Maybe this video will help you see that even more.
Love can be such a non-word sometimes. It loses its meaning, its potency, like I really love a cheeseburger, and then I really love, like a sunny day, and then I really love my family. Like none of those loves are remotely the same. They're totally different things, It's really difficult to write a song about love or even use the word love in a song, because of what does it mean? What does it really mean, I'm just really excited to play. Like, I love, good crowds when they sing, and like I like it when they feel like they're part of what's going on, because to me it's not about playing perfect music as much as it's about like almost kind of like a relationship with each other. About 7 years ago, when I was down in Jacksonville, Florida, I flew down there to work in the studio, and while I was down there, we got a call that several of our friends had been in a really bad car accident. And later on that night, I found out that one of my best friends, Steve, had died as a result of injuries from that accident. I woke up the next morning and I was just really angry and confused and hurt, And I process things through music. That's just how I do deal with my issues. And so I felt that I really needed some sort of I needed to have some sort of conversation with God, because I was really, really frustrated. I felt like there's some things I needed to say, and so that's what I would do through the music. And that's really a lot of where the song How He Loves came out of, was I needed these words. I needed this conversation. I'm really looking forward to playing music tonight. I'm really excited to be with all the people who are going to be there. He is jealous of me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind. And the love I'm singing about in that song is not a pretty, clean. It's not a Hollywood hot pink love. It's a kind of love that's willing to love things that are messy, and willing to love even the difficult and sort of kind of gross kind of things, Oh, how He loves us so. Oh, how he loves us, how he loves us. That's really the kind of song I wanted to write, is through this frustrating period, and he could, in my anger, in my resentment, and in my frustration, he could still love me through that. And in this process of dealing with my buddy dying, and he could love me through that, and he was okay. He wasn't, offended at the fact that I was angry at God. Just looking at these old lyrics, you think after seven years, but still really tough. This song isn't a celebration of weakness and anger. It's a celebration of a God who would want to hang with us through those things, who would want to be a part of our lives through those things. And despite who we are, he would want to be a part of us and be a part of our community and be a part of our family. And that's the kind of love I think I'm talking about.